let's get to the big fish. The big fish of the outfield is center fielder Julio Rodriguez. What is your grade for Julio's 2024 season?
Before I even give it out, I think this is another good time to remind people these grades are going to be on curves. Certain guys have higher expectations than others. Your center fielder has much higher expectations than others. If you were to look at this in a nutshell and say he had a near 4-win season, a lot of people would give that an A. Knowing how his first half went and who he was supposed to be this year, I give Julio a B-.
And I give him a C+. I just can't get the first half out of my mind of how frustrated I felt watching him at the plate and watching the Mariners offense crater into the ground. And him supposed to be the best player on the roster and the best hitter on the roster just seemingly look overmatched at the plate was extremely frustrating. I think it's really hard to look at this 2024 season for Julio Rodriguez as anything else than a disappointment. The final numbers look good. They look okay. Sorry, good's the wrong word. I say they look okay for what Julio's expectations are. The 4 wins, the 117 WRC plus. The excellent defense was really good.
I will say this. If those numbers were attached to Randy Arozarena or Victor Robles' name, be a different conversation. Those guys don't have the expectations that Julio has.
Correct. So when you put it into context of who Julio Rodriguez is and what our expectations for him are and the contract that he has attached to him, it's hard to look at his season as anything other than a disappointment, I think. Because, frankly, the first 3 full months he played in a Mariners uniform this year were terrible. It frankly was just not good enough for what the Mariners needed. His second half was pretty good. A 158 WRC plus in the second half. Like that is remarkably good. That is what Julio Rodriguez is. Now, it did help there was some games taken out there in the middle because of injury. But besides that, it was great. Now let's get that for 6 months, 5 months, 6 months out of the year.
He can't be buoyed by months. He just can't. You can't be that streaky of a player and then also be tabbed as a superstar. It just doesn't work. Randy Arozarena is really streaky. Now, he's a good player. He's a very good player, in fact. But he's not labeled as a superstar. He's not tabbed as one of the game's best. He's very good, but he's not in that category. Julio and the contract that is attached to his name says you are expected to be that. And while his second half was great, while he really turned things around, it wasn't for long enough. You just can't put up the numbers he put up in the first half every year. The Mariners can't have this happen every year, where it takes him that long to get going. They paid him too much, they rely on him too much, and he means too much to the team and the offense for that to continue to go on. He's got to fix whatever it is that he needs to fix at the plate to make sure that this doesn't happen moving forward, because it's back-to-back years. He's gotten off to prolonged slow starts. In his rookie year, he got off to a really bad April. Now, he got screwed on a bunch of calls by umpires in that April of 2022. But then in May, he turned it around. Turned it around a lot faster. And once he did, he was a top 5 hitter in the league in 2022. By WRC+, he was a top 5 hitter in the league from May and on. And that has not happened in 23 or 24. Because his numbers in the first half, it wasn't bad for Julio Rodriguez standards. It's not as if he put up a 110 WRC+ in the first half, and people were sitting there saying, well, for most guys, that's perfectly good. For Julio, we need more. No, he was bad for any player in the first half of the year. Just wasn't cutting it.
It was 86, so lower than what Mitch Garver put up for the whole season. That was his WRC+ in the first half. Not good enough.
No, he had
just frankly. Like, here's the expectation I'll set for Julio for next year. 3 months to start the season, be over 100 WRC+ in all 3 of those months. Not 115, not 120, not 125. Over 100. He has yet to do that in his career where he's over 100 3 months in a row to start the year.
And he has to do that.
Yeah.
That's what he's paid to do. If you get off to a tough start, first couple weeks of the year, we know Seattle's cold during April. We know the ball doesn't travel. That can happen. But if it goes on for 3 months, it's a real problem. And again, this is why when you set Julio's expectations for 2025, it's hard for me to now sit here, and I'm guessing you're in the same boat. Actually, I know because we've talked about it off air. It's hard for us to sit here and say that we are confident he's going to be an MVP candidate and a 130 WRC plus hitter next year. He'll play great defense. He'll steal his bases. He'll probably be 2020 again. But when you're talking about total offensive production, the safe net feels like he's going to be about a 115 WRC plus hitter. That's not a bad player. We saw he just put up 4 wins this year. If he gets off to a better start, it could be more like closer to 5. But am I confident in saying he's going to play like an MVP? I'm not. He just has not had enough prolonged superstar level production for us to say that.
The other thing about this, too, is based on a lot of the messaging of the Mariners and potential offseason additions of making this offense better, of understanding that this past season offensively was a clear step back and it needs to get better. Well, if they don't feel like they're going to go outside the organization and add massive impact talent from the outside, the clear improvement needs to be from the guys currently on the roster. And who can improve the most on this roster offensively, Lyle? It's Julio. We said the same thing last year. I think we're regurgitating what we said last offseason. There is really no bigger addition than a full season of the peak of Julio Rodriguez, which we saw in 2022 can be just a difference maker for an offense. We didn't see that for the full season this year, and it reflected on the offense's poor numbers. So if they're really not going to go out and they're not going to upgrade at third, they're not going to upgrade at first, they're not going to upgrade at second, they're not going to get another bat that can either DH or play in the outfield, well, the improvement's going to have to come from number 44 then, because in terms of what he's got ahead of him, he'll be 24 next year. We hope that whatever mistakes that he realized he made last offseason when it came to his swing mechanics and how he approached the offseason and how he showed up to spring training with his swing and what he knows feels good with him now. Hopefully some more communication with Edgar Martinez this offseason. I think we've figured out that the bond between those two is pretty good, and the communication that Edgar provides to him is very effective. Mm-hmm. So if he can find a way to tie all that in and be more productive this offseason and bring himself to spring training next year ready to go from the start, I think will be just an enormous difference maker. But we're going to have to see it. Mm-hmm. Because the last 2 seasons where he has had major league off seasons, it's just been too slow at the start.
Mm-hmm. TJ, I'm sitting here listening to you say, if they don't sign a third baseman, if they don't sign a second baseman, if they don't sign a first baseman, I think you mean when. Because, say it with me, let's harmonize it, not
a smart strategy.
Well, that was not in sync at all. We tried, but yes, the messaging is the same. Not a smart strategy.
Do you know what was just puzzling about this year? I know T-Mobile Park was hard to hit in this year, but Julio had a 98 WRC plus at home this year. 98. Can I remind the people that WRC plus is park adjusted? So even taking into the fact that everybody sucked at T-Mobile Park this season, he was still below average when it came to the median outcome of the average hitter at T-Mobile Park this year. He was 2 percentage points below that. Puzzling. Absolutely puzzling. Because in his career, 124 WRC plus last year in 2023, 162 his rookie year. Didn't seem to have a problem then.
I think the OPS actually boldly highlights it better even than the WRC plus. 655 OPS at home. That's not park adjusted. Again, OPS doesn't take park factors into account, but if you just look at the pure production, 655 OPS at home and an 805 OPS on the road. And honestly, it's dragged out even a little further than that. In the final month of 2023, Julio only had a 78 WRC plus at home. So this is stretched out for a little while now, and this is now also going to be something to watch in 2025. We can talk about the batter's eye all we want. We can talk about the bad Seattle park factors all we want. But by the Mariners giving him that contract, they're saying not only do we expect you to be a superstar pretty much all year and not be buoyed by months, but we expect you to be a superstar both at home and on the road. We're not paying you to be Teoscar Hernandez. We're paying you to be Julio Rodriguez. So I really hope that gets fixed in 2025, but it's now going to be a story to watch. And now yet all the more reason I'm wondering about this batter's eye and how close a look they're going to take this winter, because you can't have the face of your franchise having this many problems hitting at home. You just can't do it.
I agree. I was going to jump in there and say, let's just blame the batter's eye. It's very easy to do. So we'll see what the Mariners come up with this offseason for the batter's eye, whether or not they decide to change it or not. I think will reflect whether or not they believe it actually makes a difference. So I think they will source some input on that.
And it seems to hamper right-handed hitters more than left-handed hitters. At least that's the early takeaway. So I would be fascinated if the Mariners did something this offseason. They probably wouldn't promote it publicly. But considering these guys all still have houses here, even if they're not living here, if they would pay for Julio's flight out to Seattle for a couple days, for a Cal Raleigh flight out to Seattle for a couple days to stand in the right side of the batter's box, for a Randy Arozarena flight to Seattle for a couple days, and say, stand in this box. Is this a problem? Is and if so, what is it? Just, you're not in the middle of an at-bat. You don't have to think about anything else. Stare out and look at it. What is the issue? Does the mound feel slanted based on looking at the batter's eye? Is it hard to pick up the baseball with that batter's eye being slanted? Get the guys that are most meaningful to your offense, especially the ones that hit from the right side, and get their take on it. Because there's nobody whose opinions on it are more important than theirs. They're going to be the ones that are hitting, and they're going to be the ones that need to hit well for you.
I have two more things. Number one, do either of us know what's best for Julio Rodriguez to change this offseason? No. I listed off a couple ideas of what could potentially change for him. Where he trains, who he trains with, how much media he decides to do this offseason. I don't know if he maybe changes his diet. I have no idea. Those are just a couple of ideas of what could potentially change this offseason. If you want to know, you probably should just follow Julio on Instagram, and you could figure out if he changes something or not. But among things big leaguers can change, it's workload, trainer, and location for the most part. Diet is depending on the person, but Julio's going to be 23 going into 24. He could probably eat whatever he wants and stay in great shape, because that's just usually how the human body rolls. The last thing, in the most simplistic terms, this dude needs to find a way to hit more doubles next year. How does a guy who's that fast only hit 17 doubles in nearly 600 plate appearances? That almost should not happen. More home runs than doubles for a guy that fast who hits the ball on the ground as much as he does, should not happen. He went 2 months this year, Lyle, without hitting a double, right? It was from late April into June where he didn't hit a double.
I'm looking at his splits right now because once you brought up the doubles, I was curious what it looked like by month. Through June, he had 6 doubles to his name. In the month of June, he had 1 double. 1. And he wasn't hurt in June. He played 26 games.
Just did not hit the ball in the gap.
Right. Or at least for the most part in June. I'm trying to remember if that injury happened right at the end of June or if it was early July. It was one or the other.
It was July.
Point being, he played most of June. He had 1 double, and he had 6 total through the first 3 months. We talked about it a lot earlier in the year, and it is the case. He has to lift the ball more. Now, some of that will lead to home runs, but he just has to lift it, period. He's got to hit line drives. He was hitting the ball really hard. His Savant page reflects that, but he was hitting everything on the ground. He's got to get the ball off the ground. Part of that is he's just going to have to stay balanced. That was clear to anybody watching the games the first half of the year. He was not balanced. He was way off balance. He was falling out of the batter's box. I think that's going to have to be something that again, we can't pinpoint everything that Julio Rodriguez is going to have to do this offseason. We don't know. We're just sitting here talking about it. But the one thing that we can at least feel fairly confident about from anybody who can just sit and watch games, wasn't balanced. He's got to be balanced. Has to be.
He's going to be a significantly more productive player if he just wants to stay in the 20 to 30 to probably peak 35 home run range. if he's hitting 40 doubles. Perfectly fine. Like, that's an excellent offensive player. 17's not cutting it. 17 for somebody with his speed is just like, no. And he made plenty of contact this year. Like, we're just going to go even more basic. Batting average. He made enough contact. Just wasn't for any damage. Not enough.
And he still needs to cut down that strikeout rate. He made more contact, but he still got to strike out less.
Yeah.